Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive. Today we're tackling a big one, a question that's been around forever. Can we actually cure aging? We're
Uh-huh.
going deep, deep into an article called The Pursuit of Immortality. Can transhumanism cure aging?
Oh, yeah, I know that one.
It is packed with ideas that'll make you think we're in a sci-fi movie, but it's all based on actual science. This deep dive is all about understanding how transhumanists think about aging.
Right.
What's the science they're so optimistic about, and what could happen in a world where people live way longer than we do now? We're going to talk about some pretty wild stuff. Gene editing, zombie cells, nanobots, and
Mhm.
the ethics of, potentially living forever.
It really makes you think.
It really does. So to kick things off, can you give us the lowdown on what aging actually is, like at the most basic level?
Okay, so basically aging is like wear and tear, but on a microscopic level.
Okay.
Over time, our cells just gradually lose their ability to function properly and repair themselves. And that leads to all the things we associate with getting older.
So it's not just wrinkles and gray hair.
No.
There's like a whole breakdown happening.
A whole cellular breakdown. And the article we're looking at breaks down some of the big culprits in this process.
Okay, so hit me with those culprits. Let's start with cellular senescence.
All right, cellular senescence. Imagine cells have a kind of expiration date, right?
Okay.
They can only divide so many times before they just stop. That's senescence.
Uh-huh.
The problem is these cells don't just disappear, they kind of linger around, becoming what some people call zombie cells. And they're not just harmless, they actually release inflammatory substances that can damage nearby healthy cells.
Oh, wow. So they're like bad apples spoiling the bunch.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we got zombie cells. What else is going on?
Well, then there's this thing called telomere shortening.
Telomere.
Yeah, think of telomeres like the little plastic tips at the end of your shoelaces. They protect your shoelaces from fraying. Telomeres are kind of like that, but for our chromosomes, the things that hold our DNA. Every time a cell divides, the telomeres get a little bit shorter.
Like the plastic tips wearing down.
Exactly. And when those telomeres get too short, the cell just can't divide anymore. That contributes to aging.
Got it. What else is going wrong?
Well, we've got to talk about mitochondria, the powerhouses of our cells, providing us with all that energy we need.
Right, our mitochondria.
Yeah. As we age, their function just declines,
Mm-hmm.
leading to less energy and more damage to the
It's
cells.
like our cells are running out of gas.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's damage to our DNA, years of being exposed to environmental toxins, stress, just living life. It takes a toll on your DNA.
So like wear and tear, but on a genetic level?
Yeah, exactly. And then there's protein accumulation. Proteins are like the workers in our cells, right?
Mm-hmm.
But over time, they can misfold or get damaged, and these dysfunctional proteins start clumping together, which messes with normal cell function.
It's like our cells are getting all clogged up.
Yeah, clogged up with broken machinery.
So we've got zombie cells, telomeres wearing down, mitochondria running out of steam, DNA damage, protein buildup. It's a lot.
It is a lot.
But the article doesn't just leave us there feeling doomed.
It,
It gets into how transhumanists want to tackle all of this,
Right.
like head on. And this is where the science fiction part comes in, right?
oh, yeah.
Let's dive into some of these futuristic technologies.
Right.
First up, gene editing.
So gene editing. This one is getting a lot of attention. Tools like CRISPR are allowing scientists to actually target and change specific genes.
Okay.
And transhumanists believe we might be able to repair genes that are connected to aging or even lengthen those telomeres.
Wow. So it's like editing out the parts of our DNA that make us age.
Yeah, basically. It's super complicated, but that's the main idea.
And then there's gene therapy, adding whole new genes to fight aging. It's like giving our bodies a software upgrade.
Exactly. A software upgrade to fix those aging glitches.
What are the downsides to something like that, though?
Well, we're still in the really early stages of gene therapy.
Right.
There are definitely risks, and there are a lot of ethical things to think about,
Yeah, definitely.
but we can't deny how beneficial it could be.
What about those zombie cells?
Oh, yeah.
There are drugs being developed to target them specifically.
Yeah, they're called senolytics.
Senolytics.
They're designed to clear out those senescent cells, and they could potentially reduce inflammation and help us live longer and healthier lives.
So like a reset button for those aging cells.
Exactly.
But what about the damage that's already done? Can we actually reverse aging,
Mhm.
not just slow it down?
That's where stem cell therapy comes in.
Stem cell therapy.
Yeah, stem cells are like the body's master builders.
Oh, right.
They can turn into any kind of cell, and they're essential for repair and regeneration. The problem is the number of stem cells we have decreases as we age, which makes it harder for our bodies to heal.
So stem cell therapy is like restocking our supply of those master builders.
Exactly. And it's actually showing some promise in treating age-related conditions like joint problems and muscle
This
loss.
is blowing my mind.
Yeah.
But the article goes even further into nanotechnology and something called molecular repair.
All right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
now we're getting futuristic. Tiny robots, called nanobots, traveling through our bloodstream, repairing damage at the cellular level.
Yeah.
It's like having microscopic mechanics fixing our bodies from the inside out.
You got it.
They could clear out those harmful proteins, fix DNA,
Or-
even deliver medication to damaged cells. Science fiction is becoming reality.
Right.
And then there's artificial intelligence,
Mhm.
which is also playing a part in aging research.
It is.
How does that even work?
Well, AI is great at analyzing massive amounts of data. When it comes to aging, it can help us understand how our genes, our lifestyles, and our environment all interact to cause aging.
So AI is helping us crack the code of aging. That's amazing. What about caloric restriction?
Mhm.
I've heard about that as a way to possibly extend lifespan.
Oh, yeah, the less is more approach. Studies have shown that reducing calorie intake without, causing any harm can actually make animals live longer.
Interesting.
It's not something to try without talking to a doctor, but it does point to a connection between what we eat and how long we live.
Okay, I need a minute to process all of this. Zombie cells, nanobots, AI detectives, we've covered a lot. But before we get too excited about living longer, I think we need to talk about the potential downsides. What could go wrong?
Yeah, that's important. There's a whole other side to this. All these technologies have amazing potential, but we can't ignore the impact they could have on society as a whole. It's like we're entering uncharted territory, and that's exactly what we'll be getting into next.
Okay, so we've talked about how amazing the science is, slowing down aging, maybe even reversing it.
Right.
But like you said, there are some big what-ifs here, potential downsides, the social and ethical implications. We're stepping into unknown territory.
We are. And the article brings up some important questions, starting with a pretty basic one.
Ah.
What happens to population growth if people live a lot longer?
Yeah. If we're all living for centuries, wouldn't that be a huge strain on, well, everything?
It would.
Food, water, energy, housing.
Mm.
It's kind of overwhelming to even think about.
It's a big concern. We'd have to totally rethink how we manage resources. Like maybe we'd need to develop new types of sustainable energy, vertical farming,
Okay.
maybe even colonizing other planets, things like that.
Wow, other planets. That's thinking long term. But it also makes me wonder, who gets to live longer? Who benefits from all these advances? I mean, I can't imagine this tech is going to be cheap.
No, probably not.
So wouldn't that create even more inequality?
It would. If only rich people can afford to live longer, it would just make the gap between the rich and the poor even bigger.
Yeah, a world where rich people live for centuries and everyone else is, well, stuck with the normal lifespan.
Exactly.
That's a pretty depressing thought. And it's not just about, like, stuff. The article also talks about some really deep questions about, the meaning of life if aging isn't a thing anymore.
Yeah, that's a big one.
If there's no natural end to our lives, would we lose our sense of purpose? Would we still be driven to do great things if we feel like we have forever?
It's interesting to think about, would it make us lose that sense of urgency?
Right. Like, if our time isn't limited, do things matter as much?
Some people might say that without those limits, we'd be free to follow our passions without being pressured by time.
I can see that.
Like imagine having centuries to master a skill, to travel the world, to really get to know people. It's a really interesting idea.
But I also wonder if we'd just get bored. Like, if you have forever, does anything really matter?
It's a double-edged sword. Freedom from time, but maybe a loss of meaning and purpose.
And what about relationships, families? How would those work if everyone's living for hundreds of years?
Yeah, that's another big one. Imagine your grandparents becoming great-great-great-great-grandparents. Generations living together. It would change our entire society.
Talk about a confusing family tree.
Mm-hmm.
And what about having to say goodbye to people over and over again? I mean, we already struggle with grief and loss as it is.
It's a profound question. How would we deal with losing people multiple times over a really long lifespan? It would really make us rethink the way we connect with people, what family means, and how emotionally strong we are.
It's like we'd need a whole new way of thinking about those things, a whole new set of coping skills.
Mhm.
And then there's the big question. Should we be messing with life and death in the first place?
Right, the big ethical question.
Is it okay to use technology to override something as basic as our mortality?
Some people might say it's our responsibility to use what we know to make our lives better,
Right.
to push the limits of what's possible. But others might say that accepting our mortality is part of what makes us human, that it gives our lives meaning.
It's a question about what it really means to be human, and it's going to get more and more important as this technology gets better.
Definitely.
But let's step back for a second to make it more personal.
Hmm.
What about you? If aging was curable, would you want to live forever?
It's a hard question. On the one hand, living for hundreds of years and seeing everything the world has to offer sounds amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder, is there a point where I'd feel like I've lived enough? I think it depends on a lot of things. My quality of life, the state of the world, whether or not I had people I love to share it with.
There are no easy answers here. But this is something we might all have to decide for ourselves one day.
We might.
And I think this deep dive has shown us something really important. Wanting to live forever, or even just a lot longer, isn't just a science problem. It's a human problem.
You're absolutely right. It makes us think about the big questions.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be human? What do we value? How do we want to live our lives, individually and as a society?
And these are questions we need to keep asking as we move into this uncharted territory.
We do.
But for now, let's move on to some other things about this topic that we haven't discussed yet. So we've talked about how living longer could affect like population and resources and even the meaning of life. But I'm curious about some of the less obvious impacts. What other like ripples could this create?
Interesting question. One thing the article mentions that I think is worth talking about more is how it could change work and careers.
Oh, yeah. I hadn't thought about that.
Right. So imagine people working for like hundreds of years.
Wow.
The way we think about education, jobs, retirement, it would all have to change. Would people have a bunch of different careers over, such a long life? Would we even need retirement anymore?
It would totally change how the workplace works. Would younger people even get a chance to move up if older folks are staying in their jobs for so long?
Yeah, exactly. It could create all sorts of new problems, maybe even make the gap between generations even wider.
It's like we'd need to redesign, well, everything. Not just how we live as individuals, but our whole society. What about innovation and progress?
Oh, interesting.
Some people might say living longer means more time for discoveries and breakthroughs.
Right. More time for science, more time for art. But is that really how it would work?
Yeah, would it?
On one hand, you could say, yeah, more time means more chances to learn and experiment and create.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, maybe that pressure of knowing our time is limited is actually what pushes us to do amazing things.
That's a good point. Maybe that fear of running out of time is what really drives innovation. Speaking of driving forces, the article briefly mentions religion and spirituality.
Right.
How do you think those would adapt to a world where, aging isn't a thing anymore?
That's a tough one. It's hard to say for sure, but it's something religious leaders and thinkers would definitely have to figure out.
Yeah.
A lot of religions are based on the idea that this life is temporary, that we go on to something else after we die.
Right.
If we take away that temporary part, it could really challenge some basic beliefs.
It's almost like we'd be changing not just our bodies, but our whole culture and spirituality, too. What about the laws and politics?
Oh, yeah, another whole set of challenges. Our laws are mostly built around the idea that people live to be, like, 80. Things like inheritance, voting, even what it means to be an adult. If people are living for centuries, we'd have to change everything.
It's crazy to think about all the things that would be different. And we haven't even talked about the environment yet. We talked about resource scarcity, but wouldn't living so much longer also create way more waste and pollution?
That's a really important point. If we're not careful, trying to live forever could really hurt the planet. We'd need to focus on sustainability, recycling, and using things responsibly if we want the planet to stay healthy for future generations.
It seems like every answer just leads to more questions. This deep dive has really been eye-opening. This isn't just about finding a way to stop aging. It's about figuring out what it means to be human when the lines between life and death are kind of blurry.
Absolutely. It's about looking at all the possibilities, both the good and the bad. We need to have these conversations, weigh the benefits and the risks, and make smart choices to shape the future we want.
This has been an incredible conversation, and I feel like we've only scratched the surface. But as we wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. If you could choose the age to stop aging, what age would you pick and why? It really makes you think about what's important to you in life.
That's a great question. And it's one we all might have to answer someday. So keep thinking, keep asking questions, and keep talking about it. The decisions we make today will shape the world we live in tomorrow.
That's a great way to put it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the pursuit of immortality. And to our listeners, we hope this has sparked your curiosity and maybe even inspired you to learn more about this topic. It's a fascinating one, and it's always changing.